Today we're going to be talking about stories. Stories of authenticity, stories in the digital space, and stories in the physical space. I'm moderating a panel that's about storytelling, substance versus fluff. As a moderator, I'm going to bring to the discussion three perspectives. And as we know, every story has to have multiple perspectives. The perspective of the Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 advertiser. I'll draw from my experience working at J&J and Procter to that discussion. The perspective of the media content producer and publisher. I'll draw on my experiences from CBS and Time Warner. And lastly, the perspective of the starter brand, the challenger brand in a startup environment. And I'll draw on my experience currently leading the work at EquityProjectForAll, which is focused on global inclusive leadership and building great brands, starting with you, your personal brand. Like every good story, you have to start with the great characters. And I have three fabulous global marketers here today to talk to you about what it takes to build the quintessential brand. First, I'd like to introduce you to the brand story whisperer, KARUNA RAWAL, President, Group Client Lead, Leo Burnett. Please put your hands together for KARUNA. Next, in our character, I'm going to introduce you to our story scientist, EDLYNNE LARYEA, Director, Neutrogena, Digital Transformation and Sustainability, Johnson & Johnson. EDLYNNE, come join the stage. And last but not least, every story needs a fun factor. I'd like to introduce you to our story mixologist, SETHI, Vice President, Smirnoff and Brands, Diageo. Let's take a seat and let's get the show on the road. Is everybody ready? All right. Okay, so let's start with this fun slide. Everybody recognizes the brands on this slide, I'm sure. You have everything from high prestige with Chanel on there to the staple that we all rely on, Amazon. And with every great brand, there's always a great strategist and there's always a great story. And I know that one of the founders of the advertising industry, Leo Burnett, once said, what builds people builds businesses. And I'd like to turn to KARUNA to open us up this afternoon on a story around a brand that you've worked on that actually helped do both, people and business. Okay.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a campaign I believe most of you are probably familiar with. But the reason I chose this is because it really, I think, highlights a lot of the things that we've been hearing about all morning. So it's really about uncovering a rich story, and we actually uncovered it through social listening. And really leveraging a way to tell that story in a way that would spread virally. So the background on this, if you're not familiar, is Always Like a Girl campaign. And the brief that we originally got was to change the world one girl at a time. And to do that in a way that would be social by design. So from its very roots, and if you think about Always, a big P&G brand, the most, advertising dollars always went to television, and stories were always told in a very traditional way. But this was an opportunity for us to do something different. And the reason it was important is because the brand was losing relevancy among young girls. And so they were really looking at, when I say young girls, I'm a lot older, so I'm talking about like 16 to 24, when girls actually first start purchasing this product. So we wanted to figure out a way to really connect with them. I'm going to show you, this campaign has now been around for several years, and it's continued to build. Why don't we look at it, and then we'll talk about some of the results that came through and how we got to it.
Hi, Erin. Show me what it looks like to run like a girl.
My hair.
Show me what it looks like to fight like a girl. Now throw like a girl.
Aww.
So do you think you just insulted your sister?
No. I mean, yeah, insulted girls, but not my sister.
My name is Dakota, and I'm 10 years old.
Show me what it looks like to run like a girl. Throw like a girl. Fight like a girl. What does it mean to you when I say run like a girl?
It means run fast as you can.
So that was actually the Super Bowl spot that we did, but the original video that we did was actually released on YouTube. It was over 3 minutes long. It did not, by the way, show any side-by-side demo of blue goo on pads, which was sort of the category norm. So we changed a lot of things, and I think we really, as we developed this campaign, the first thing we did was really listen to what was going on in culture and in girls' lives during that time when they're transitioning and going through puberty. And you know, the brand had always done a lot of work in this area, but they'd never really come forth and talked about what it really means to connect with that consumer. So we had the opportunity to take our purpose, which is about empowering women, bring it together with this data that we had around the fact that a girl's confidence plummets significantly during puberty, and if we don't do anything, it doesn't come back until she's well in her 70s. So there was some pretty powerful data that we uncovered, and we did a lot of social listening. This was a global campaign, so we were able to get that insight and validate it across the world. And then we created a social campaign, and when we put it on YouTube, it just took off. I mean, we were expecting, we got all excited. I remember, 100,000 views. We're like, okay. So we actually got to 90 million. And we had 4.4 billion impressions. We blew every KPI you can think of. And the best part was we actually built the brand. We built brand equity. We built market share. We built brand preference. And the thing that I think was most compelling for us is when before the campaign, before they saw it, 19% of girls thought doing something like a girl was a positive thing. And after the campaign, the number was 76%. So we made a dramatic difference in culture. And the reason like I said, I chose this campaign, just to wrap it up, is that it came from us really listening to our consumer through social media, really understanding how to build a story that was connected to her life, not just about what we as the brand were doing, and really connected back to our purpose. So we uncovered a human truth about what girls are going through at this age. We connected that to our brand truth about how we could be a resource and play a role in her life at that critical moment, and brought it together to create something that everyone said, no one's going to watch a 3-minute video about femcare, come on. But I think it brings back to this idea of powerful storytelling. When you actually have something relevant to say to your consumers, it allows them to really participate in the story. So
that's a great example. Thank you. I think, yes, applause for KARUNA and her team. It's a campaign that's still running strong and a great example. I go from one personal care product to another area of personal care. EDLYNNE, do you want to tell us a bit more about some of your experiences in growing the skin health category?
Yeah, so I thought I would do something a little bit different and talk to you a little bit about some of the experiments that we're trying on Neutrogena. So one of the things that we've done for a number of years is we have a lot of celebrity partnerships. So the idea of influencers is something we've embraced for a really long time. And what we're trying to do with our celebrity partnerships is change how we use our celebrities. So one of the things that I'm really proud of what we were doing, to talk a little bit about what KARUNA was saying about purpose, is really leverage our purpose and speak it through our celebrity partners. And Kerry Washington's been a really great partner for us. Kerry is, of course, very passionate about different skin tones. So for our Neutrogena cosmetics line, she was really instrumental in actually helping us figure out how to calibrate some of those skin tones and be really, really a strong partner in. I know we throw that term around about co-creation, but she actually really was a big part of it. The other thing that we're really proud of is CVS had a really great initiative around not retouching images. So it's important for us, very much talking about young women and young people in general, making sure that we're really being true about the types of things that we're telling them. So Kerry, we said, hey, would you be a partner with us and CVS and put out a retouched image and really talk about this? So this was something that we felt really strongly about, as opposed to just putting her in a spot holding up a tube of something, which we're really great at. Is there a different way that we can help advance the conversation and tell a little bit more about the story of Neutrogena through our spokespeople? So pretty proud of this initiative, because this is something we probably wouldn't have been able to do a couple of years ago. So that's one of the experiments as we start to think about who speaks for us and how we talk to our consumers. It's a little different than me getting on Twitter and interacting with all of our consumers when you're a really, really massive global brand. And what I love about Neutrogena is, it's a fun fact, everybody thinks Neutrogena comes from their country around the world. So if you're Swiss, you think it's Swiss. Asian, like people in Singapore think it's Singaporean, maybe vaguely, but it's kind of a brand that everybody embraces. And the other example I'd love to share, if you feel, go ahead, is we did something for Valentine's Day, and I'll play it for you. It was only ran in social and on stories, and Instagram, and well, I'll let it play it. I'll tell you about it. This was a huge experiment for us because we don't normally design things to be platform specific, so fit for platform. But what I love about this was we actually designed it to be like a story. So there wasn't a storyboard where I had a script from the agency or anything. We just said we wanted to take a moment where it was like a couple hanging out on Valentine's Day and playing with masks, because that's something that people probably have done and have fun doing, and let's just see what happens. So we went in studio, set up the camera, and had them interact, and it was almost like shooting somebody's like a television sitcom or something, where they were just playing around, and we saw what we got, and then we edited it down into what you saw there. And that may sound really simple to some of you in the audience, but for a brand like ours, that was crazy. I had people like, what are you doing? Like, we went rogue. How did that happen? But I think it's really important for us to figure out how we can tell authentic stories that make sense without it. They weren't holding up the bottle and like, look at us, we're using Neutrogena, but you get it. And I think that's the struggle that brands like ours have today, which is how do we make sure that we're starting to tell authentic moments that are enjoyable? Did this change anybody's life? No. But it was something that we thought was really fun and we wanted to give a try.
So let's go from authentic moments and iconic brands to another iconic brand in a different category. Jay, talk to us about the story behind Smirnoff.
Yeah, so I'm really proud. I spent a decade at P&G and in the beauty space, and so it's fun to be here with you guys. I was really proud then to shift into Smirnoff, which is the world's #1 vodka and has been around for 155 years. We serve over 1 billion drinks a year globally to 100 million people. So the impact is really significant. But in the US, of course, the perception has actually been something we had to work on, because over the years, the brand perception had shifted. And so we're here talking at a modern marketing conference, but really for us, the answers were in the roots. We had to go all the way back into our archives. And so my team and I went back and we discovered 2 things. One was our history. This is a brand that actually left Russia, and like most immigration stories in the US, came right in the 30s to the US, and we left because the elites wanted Smirnoff to just be for them. They wanted it to be for the czars. It was the best vodka you could have, and they wanted it for themselves. And our founder said, we want to be for the people, so you got to go. And that sense of democratization became a value and a spirit that, frankly, we needed to bring back, always keeping this brand super accessible to as many people as possible. The second thing was our roots in diversity and inclusion. We came to America in the 30s, and we're one of the first brands to use African Americans and women in advertising. We found our first LGBT ad from 1969. Decades, frankly, before other brands started engaging in this space. And that, we always say as a brand, if our predecessors had the courage to do that then we certainly could do something now. And those 2 things led to us recasting this brand to fully reflect the American landscape that we have today, and to do it in a way that's authentic and socially driven. 2 quick examples for you. The first one, this was run in a little bit of a political climate. You might have seen this. I almost lost my job for it. It says, made in America, but we'd be happy to talk about our ties to Russia under oath. And we decided to do this because, one, Hakan, actually on my team, is in the front row here. We first tested 25 different claims. We tested it quantitatively, and we used social media to understand what would be the most impactful. Made in America rose to the top. That then led to the brief to the agency to say, what can you do to get everyone's attention? They very smartly put this forward. And at first, we were going to run it on social. But we knew that would actually have more risk because you can share. Ironically, my lawyers were more comfortable with social because it's a different understanding. So instead, we ran it in one train stop in Harlem. And within 3 hours, it was picked up on Reddit, 2 billion impressions 48 hours later. It was quite the controversy, but we stuck to it. We stuck to it because it was a truth. We are made in America. We're very proud to be from here. We've been here for 85 years. And we are happy to talk about our ties to Russia under oath. So I'll say even Breitbart was okay with it.
Let's take a look at the...
And then there's a second clip we want to show you that's another expression of our claim.
Smirnoff vodka is made in America for everyone in America, no matter who you are, where you come from, what you look like.
Or who wore it better.
Is it me?
No, sweetie. It's me.
The one and only Laverne Cox. And what I'm proud about this is, one, again, it's a reaffirmation of a message statement that we knew would work and what we stand for. But more importantly, Laverne Cox is obviously one of the biggest transgender icons in America today. And I think what I'm personally proud of is the fact that she's not airing in a Pride commercial for us for 1 month out of the year. This is national advertising, and I wanted to prove that no matter who you are, you could be in it. And this is now one of the top performing ads in the entire industry, not just at Diageo. And it has set a new benchmark. Jonathan Van Ness also stars in this campaign. And I think more than anything, it's allowed us to remember that good people who are talented deserve to be in the commercial space.
Awesome. That's a great example of inclusivity and expressing that. Another big area in terms of storytelling is around the use of technology. And EDLYNNE, I'd love for you to talk to us more about how technology has influenced some of the Neutrogena offerings in recent times.
Yeah, so if you think about your face, it's your face. And you need different things at different times. So for the women, or even men, I shouldn't judge, because everyone has skin, and it's something we're very focused on in Neutrogena. When you use a sheet mask, they don't necessarily fit your face very well, or you may have a part of your face that might be dry, or you have acne in other areas. So we came up with what we're calling Skin ID, and it's the ability to 3D print face masks. So we're able to put specific treatment on different types of areas of the mask and 3D printed so it actually fits your face. And it's really, thinking about our purpose, like the inclusivity of it and the fact that we want to design products that work for you, because we're all about making sure that everybody has the healthiest skin possible and it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So it's been really interesting to show it to people and say, oh my gosh, I haven't actually had that experience where it's really, really changed my face because it was designed for me personally, and we're bringing that technology to you. And it's all through an app, so you basically take the sensor, you're able to take a picture of your face and decide what treatments you really need to use. So I think it's really important for us to use technology not for technology's sake, but actually to really help us drive what we're talking about in terms of our purpose and what we're trying to deliver, which is making sure that everybody has the healthiest skin possible. So it's very tempting to want to put, pictures of like tigers and lions on your face or something, but that doesn't actually help you get to true skin health. So we really need to focus in on solutions that are delivering on that core value.
Awesome. Talking about technology, when we think through today's options, a lot of people talk about blockchain and AR and VR, but sometimes it's going back to the old world stories, right? And I know at Smirnoff and Jay, you have some things in the archives that really spurred innovation around vodka. So you want to tell us a little bit more about...
Yeah, so the Moscow Mule, invented 75 years ago, the first great American cocktail, created by 3 people. Our guy, who was a vodka guy, who couldn't sell vodka because Americans didn't know what it was. The ginger beer guy, who didn't know what ginger beer was. And a woman who had the copper mugs. Now, interestingly, there's a lot of mystery about who the woman is, because part of the problem with American history is we excluded women a lot from the books. But we know it was a woman, and we're really proud to be able to bring this story back. But what was equally interesting as a part of that was how it actually became popularized. So our guy was smart enough to know that this was the year after the Polaroid camera was invented. So he would take 2 pictures. He would go to the bar. He would convince the bartender to try this. They loved it. And he said, I want to take 2 photographs. One is for you and your your friends at the bar to have, because it was just a cool novelty item like we think about with Instagram today. But the second is so I can take the next photograph and go to the next bar and show the next bartender that you took it in, and so I would get more distribution that way. And so, in many ways, we didn't have social media, but that was influencer marketing in a really significant way, and I think that paves the way for the kind of innovative thinking that we need today. I think that in the next slide, one of the things we're exploring a lot in this space, technology will transform the way we think about the spirit space, including AI. I talked about Moscow Mule being a great cocktail. Well, we haven't really created another great vodka cocktail in the US for the last decade. There's been a long time since one has been done, and we're still obviously using the traditional methods, the experts, all the things you would normally go to. But given how much information we have today, can AI actually help us to change the way we think about cocktail creation? As an example for you, if you look at the roots of American cocktail history, a lot of the ingredients came from Europe because they were tied to the immigration pattern. So as people came, they brought their ingredients. But now if you look at immigration, it's mostly coming from Latin America, Asia, the Middle East. So as we use that information, it's helping us change the way we think about what will be those ingredients that will change the way we think about what cocktails look like in the future. And just to give another example, here's an example from one of our brands called Bullet. It was at the Tribeca Film Festival last night, and they made a 3D printed bar.
Bullet asked me to come up with a 3D printed cocktail for a massive 3D printed bar. My first thought was, this is crazy. How are we gonna make this happen? I was able to pull it off with Benjamin from Printed Drink. We tried out over 100 different cocktails. It was great working with somebody that's different than me, because it actually made me start thinking about the technology and what's next. That's kind of the whole mentality of frontier.
I think it's just across the board pushing the boundaries and using technology to really change even how we think about safety and how we can actually help people to avoid overconsumption.
We've had some amazing brands we've spoken about here. We've talked about technology, personalization, innovation, but beyond the brands that you manage, KARUNA, what are some of the brands that you really, you think, moved the needle and influenced your thinking when it comes to storytelling, especially around a digital footprint?
So the brand I wanted to talk about a little bit is Levi's, actually, another iconic brand that I think has done a really great job of storytelling and really reinventing themselves. And they came up with this campaign called Live in Levi's several years ago, and we've seen many iterations of it. But it kind of comes back to that very basic insight around the fact that you have lots of different brands and jeans for special occasions, but everybody lives in Levi's, and everyone's got a story about Levi's, so they've really taken that and really leveraged that. And it's another brand, as we've talked about earlier, that really believes in diversity and inclusion and standing up for their values, and they've done a lot of work in the last few years, if you hadn't heard, around gun violence, around standing up for everybody's rights and inclusivity. So it's a brand that I think continues, after all these years, continues to refresh itself, but yet stay true to its roots.
Absolutely. And when it comes to EDLYNNE, what do you think are some of the key brands?
I picked a cliche one, but I think the reason why I picked it is a little bit different potentially, but I think Nike is a great storyteller, and I think I am so impressed with the Serena Williams spot that they did, because I don't think they spent a ton of money to get it moving, and then they didn't, because it was something that really stirred discussion. So that showed a mastery of not only social media, but I'm old and I still subscribe to the New York Times in paper, and it was on the back page, same day. So excellent media planning. So if you plan the media, bravo to you on Nike. But I think what they really do a really good job of is their stories are very flexible and inclusive. So it's not just one narrative. There are a lot of different small stories around the way Nike tells stories. So yesterday, you may have noticed they launched another one around an athlete. He has cerebral palsy, and he does long distance marathon type races. And just telling his story, it really fits into the whole Dream Crazy platform. And I think it's really, really lovely where they're able to leverage that not only to tell really great big equity stories, but also pull it through to product. So you'll see them bring that in a very credible way all the way through. So I think lots of kudos to Nike, because that takes a lot of thinking about the details. But it also, for me, I think we need to think about stories as platforms that we build off of, and not just linear one time, like I did a big spot and that's it, because it falls down now. So
Jay, you have a fun story on this too. A fun brand.
Yeah, not as deep as Nike,
Iconic.
but I picked KFC because 90% of big brands are losing share. And to know how to reinvent yourself, we're talking so much about all the disruption that's happening here, and it is an age of disruption, but it's also an age of bravery. And I think what they've done so well in KFC is understand how do you pivot the entire brand, the branding, the use of the kernel, the innovation, social media in a huge way. This week alone, they're partnering with now new different brands as a way to keep the brand relevant and interesting, and not in a space that many of us in New York necessarily are eating KFC, but they know their consumer. And that's smart, and there's so many brands today that are facing similar challenges, and I think they deserve credit.
Excellent. You know, we talk a lot about the world of digital and physical colliding together, and we've seen some examples of that. I know, KARUNA, you were telling me you went to the Macy's store recently, and what did you see?
So I think most of you, if you're from New York, you've probably seen this, but Macy's recently acquired Story. And Story is a retail concept that I think has been in New York for some time. And what they really do is it's almost like it's a magazine. It's an editorial concept where they're literally curating and bringing new collections together for a short amount of time, and it changes up. So the whole idea is the store is your media, and it keeps people coming back and creates a lot of interest and a lot of buzz. So interestingly, Macy's, an old-time retailer that is trying to reinvent themselves and fight against all this disruption, just acquired Story. So they're putting in Story concepts in 36 Macy's stores. It just started this month, and so it'll be interesting to see as the physical and the digital and old retail and new retail come together. Whether it'll be successful in changing where Macy's goes. But at a minimum, I think we're all expecting that it'll influence how Macy's thinks about retailing. But it's kind of an exciting development to see that come together.
It's almost creating an Instagram in-store experience with the vibrancy of that store, pop-in store inside. EDLYNNE, you talked about Nike, and I know they've done some interesting work when it comes to being crazier in retail and some of the new things they've done. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about, what you've observed, given on the strength of the campaign that Serena Williams starred in and what they've done with the flagship here in New York, for example?
Yeah, I think it's not crazy at all. I think it's really smart. They have really figured out how to bring the experience of selecting your products online in store. So it really gives you a really true customized experience where you can showcase all of their clothing, and really you should definitely check it out. It's a really awesome opportunity to bring sort of the digital into the real world. So that is a crazy dream. I think we're all trying to figure out how they do that, but they managed to manifest that story and that experience in the real world.
I think what's fun is we're seeing a lot of experiments in this space. Yeah. So, again, I think the jury's out on which ones are going to work, but it's exciting to see them coming together and influencing each other back and forth.
Absolutely.
So.
And one of the things we talked about when we think about digital storytelling and we talk about footprints is that it's not simple. It's a winding road journey, and we know that brands are experimenting both with the physical as well as the digital. Any of you want to make comment on this and what's happening? Because it's not necessarily moving in one direction. It's multi-directional. It's entry and exit. People come into the market, they go out, they go choose a competitor. Like, what are some of the things you're noticing when it comes to the journey?
So I'll kick it off, but turn it over to you guys. So one of the things we did very differently when we actually worked on the Like a Girl campaign is we did our whole media strategy and plan alongside the creative brief, like right up front. We really thought through the entire journey and knew we were going to start with YouTube, but we also had all of the other channels. We thought about the role of every channel and where it was going to play a role and what it was going to do for us, so that we had a complete map that was ready to go. But it just was, what was the entry point? And after that, we had an opportunity for the brand to, at every phase of the journey, to be visible with the campaign in the right way at the right moment, so that we could deliver the right message.
And just a quick thing, I have my handle over there for any questions. I'm not sure if we will have time, but you can certainly tweet your, DM your message to me, and we'll try and get to it afterwards. So that's my handle if anyone has any burning questions. Go ahead.
I'd quickly just say, I think my frustration with the talk about consumer journey is every time I get one, it's the same, right? So it's like in personal care with women, it's always a woman, first of all, and then she gets up in the morning and has some coffee, and then she's on the subway, and like we're all trying to hit her at the same point in time, and I don't think that's realistic. I mean, I just bought a set of Philips Hue lights for my bachelor apartment, which I don't really need, but they're very cool. And I bought them because my Pilates studio, I was looking up and I was like, oh, these lights are kind of cool. I should check them out. Like, where would that fit in a consumer journey? Right. So I think we need to think a little bit harder. And that's where, again, kudos to the Nike team, because it's very complex in terms of how the interactions, where you're seeing things, where you're running into brands, that it isn't very linear. And sometimes it's super short, and that's okay. And we have to get more comfortable with that. And I think that is probably one of the biggest challenges we have in the world of what we do today, is to figure out this in a way that we can actually act on it, but I've yet to see a really great example of it.
And I know you, Jay, we were talking about this palette, right? And especially when we think about cocktails, it's full of color. So is art. And when we think about social media, I'd like your comments on how should we be thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think what gets me excited is how now understanding the media side of social media and the journey also informs creative, and that doesn't just sit alongside it. Like, we're actually super excited. We're doing our first big audio shoot on Saturday, and we weren't even having that conversation. Radio seemed like an old entity just a couple of years ago, and now with podcasts and streaming, like we got off the phone with Ted Danson, and he's like, "What are we doing? Podcast streaming?" He doesn't even understand it, which makes it hysterical, and it gives us a totally new avenue to reach people. And if we were just to simply follow the old rules, we'll never get there, right? So I think it's also, and my creative team, they also were like, "Oh, we're going to do an audio show." They weren't planning against it, so I think that's the real value of it. I think the other thing is understanding the relationship between the top of the funnel and the bottom of the funnel. Like, we know if I've got TV going, my social is going to work harder, especially if I'm reinforcing that message. The same thing we find with outdoor media. And so I think this is the intellectual, data-driven side, and I think we're getting smarter every day about it.
And I want to just point out, I'm going back to this because, Karuna, you talked about YouTube being the catalyst when it came to your brand way back in awareness of the girls' confidence issue, right? So I guess the key message here is it's all about your objective and your target audience and your message. And EDLYNNE, I know you have some passionate points on social media and how we think about it.
Well, I said to Raquelle, and she said, "Can you do this panel?" I said, "Well, look, I really hate talking about social media."
She hates it.
But in the sense that it's all part of the story, right? So it's everything. And I guess this visual is really talking about how it's all part of a palette. And I can't paint a picture with, I mean, I guess you could with one piece of paint, but it's not really a great masterpiece. And so I think we have to really push ourselves to stop thinking about channels all the time, and it's like, how can I tell the story? Like, it's all parts of the paint that I can use to paint the picture of my brand, and that's really what I would encourage us to think
Because no one goes and asks her, what's your blue strategy, right? It's like, what's their whole color story strategy? And we want to end, we are running out of time, so please go ahead and tweet your questions to me, and we will get to it afterwards. But we want to just really end real quick, that at the end of the day, any storytelling adventure has to start with the what and the who. What's your objective? Who's the audience? The why? Why are you telling the story? With Always This Example, for example, was about confidence in young adolescent girls. And then you think about the digital platform. Then's the how. And then, of course, the so what in terms of measurement. So what we try to do for you in a short frame of time is tell a story about authenticity, about these great storytellers that we have today. And really to remind you also, take the digital out. It really is about storytelling, period. The right story for the right time. Digital is one of the formats, and so is physical. And I couldn't help but end our panel with a little bit of an ode to the drinks category and the great work that Jay has done, and also a big thank you to KARUNA, our story whisperer, to our story scientist, EDLYNNE, for her insights, and our mixologist, Jay, for sharing some insights. So guys, feel free to tweet and ask us questions through DM, and we'll get back to you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Cheers.